Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, it's time for Republicans to end their war on employees, the dedicated, hardworking, middle-class federal workers. Who are these federal workers? The Veterans Administration nursing assistants who care for our wounded warriors, Department of Defense civilian employees who support our military troops at home and abroad, Social Security Administration claims representatives who process benefits to our nation's senior citizens and people who qualify for disability payments, Nobel Prize-winning scientists who are conducting groundbreaking research at the National Institutes of Health and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration on everything from fighting cancer to understanding the origins of the universe, Environmental Protection Agency and Food and Drug Administration staff who keep our air and our water clean and our food and drugs safe, the Federal Aviation Administration air traffic controllers who keep the skies safe, and the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the United States Marshal Service, attorneys and law enforcement officers who track down, arrest terrorists and drug cartels and gang members. And Mr. President, the list goes on and on and on. Those who are on the front line of public service, our dedicated, hardworking federal employees, many of whom are struggling like every one of us to deal with their family budgets. Federal employees are already contributing $60 billion to the deficit reduction through a 2-year pay freeze. They've already contributed to deficit reduction. They were first in line to try to help balance our budget. Like their private sector counterparts, federal employees haven't been immune to the country's economic woes. They're confronting similar hardships: disabled and unemployed spouses, declining home values, rising gasoline and living expenses. Many federal employees had single-parent families. Like other Americans, federal employees struggle to pay their mortgages and find ways to send their children to college. H.R. 3630, the House Republican payroll tax cut bill, would require 2 million federal employees to shoulder nearly 1/2 of the cost of the tax reduction that benefits 160 million Americans. So, Mr. President, what the Republican bill is doing is extending the payroll reductions for working families, but saying to the middle-class federal worker, you're going to pay most of the burden. That's not going to help our economy. That's not the right way to extend the payroll tax relief. The Republican assault on our federal employees is piled on top of the current 2-year pay freeze, which is piled on top of workforce who's already lagging behind the private sector, according to the nonpartisan Congressional Research Service. Average wages among all workers in our economy has risen over 600% since 1969, while salaries for civilian federal employees have grown by a little over 400% since 1969. There's a widening gap between public sector employees and the private sector. What these proposals would do would widen that gap even further. Republicans want to extend the current pay freeze for another year. That would cost a federal employee who makes $50,000 annually $800 a year. A 3-year pay freeze would cost GS5 employees almost $4,000 in cumulative lost salaries. For GS7 employees, almost $5,000 in cumulative lost salaries. And for GS9, almost $6,000 in cumulative lost salaries. The Republican bill would require massive increases in the contributions of current and future federal employees to make to their retirement system, a system that is currently funded, while slashing benefits. This is rubbing salt in the wounds of the additional pay freeze. So they took 2-year pay freezes. The Republican bill would add a 3rd-year pay freeze, would tell our employees they have to triple their contributions to their retirements, which is another pay cut. It's not only a freeze, it's a compensation pay cut for our federal workers. In addition to that, we have asked them to do more with less. As you noticed, as I think all of us have noticed on job growth numbers, the public sector numbers are going down. The workload isn't going down. We're asking our federal workers to do more with less and now take a pay cut. That's not fair. The Republicans saved their most severe punishment for future federal employees, making it clear that their intentions is to provide as many disincentives for people to consider a career in public service as possible. increasing pension contributions for future hires by 3.2% would force an employee making $30,000 a year to pay $1,200 rather than $400. You know, we should be embracing people who are willing to help in public service. The Republicans are doing just the opposite. It is time for the Republicans to stop their war on the hard-working federal employees. Increasingly, the federal workforce is being asked to do more with less. It's time to stop that assault. Increasingly, the federal workforce is being asked to shoulder a disproportionate share of deficit reduction. I think it's time that we all properly recognize the dedication, hard work, valor, sacrifice, and professionalism of our federal workforce.